Great. So obviously we lost a panelist. Milana wasn't able to make it. Running a nonprofit marketing department means that you have probably crises even more frequently than we do as marketers. But for those of you who don't know me, Didit's been around for 22 years, started in search engine marketing, and has branched into a lot of different directions, essentially becoming a full-service agency. But we're in the news most recently as the stalking horse bidder for Gawker.com, which we want to convert into Gawker for Good, a cause marketing platform. But I want to thank Joe and John for joining me, and we've got a few questions that we went over ahead of time, and we want to sort of get right into those. If you want to pre-introduce yourselves along with the first answer to the question, you can do that. So the first question is sort of, what forms of hyperlocal geo-targeting and marketing are you using that you're sort of excited about and maybe even surprised at how well they worked?
Sure. We got no mic here.
Try this one.
I'll try this one. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Joe McHugh from The One Group. The One Group is a global hospitality company based out of New York, about 12 years old now. Our biggest brand is STK, again, started here in New York and now has expanded across the globe. So local marketing is very important to us as we expand, especially throughout the US. I think we're up to, 12 restaurants. So it really has become important to us to differentiate and make, a unique experience in each market and help to build an identity for each restaurant. Differences between audience demographics, psychographics, all of those things are important for us to build on a local level to really understand and target the consumers, based upon the different cities and the different markets. Something actually fun that we're kind of working on now, we have 2 locations in New York, 2 STK locations. One is downtown in the meatpacking, the other one is in Midtown Manhattan. And it's always interesting for us to market the restaurants separately. They're the same brand, they're about 4 miles away from each other. However, they have really, really different audiences. So this summer when we were opening our outdoor spaces, one has a rooftop, one has a patio, we were using actually social media really to hyper-target the locations and the different audiences based upon the weather, actually. So you'd be surprised as to how many people like to enjoy a patio space when it's a little bit cooler, whereas people love to enjoy a rooftop space when it is a little warmer out. So playing with the weather, playing with our different audiences in a 4-mile radius of, the restaurants are in a 4-mile radius of each other, has been, a kind of fun and exciting tool moving into this summer season.
Cool, thanks. John?
Hi, I'm John Peebles with Sotheby's. We're the auction house. We're the oldest company on the New York Stock Exchange. We've been around since 1742. So I imagine when we started, it was incredibly hyper-local because you had to show up, and we sold books. We're now, over the last couple of centuries, expanded into 50 different categories, some of which actually operate very much like a small business because they're going after a very targeted group of collectors. And from a hyper-local perspective, it's sometimes complementary and sometimes very tricky for us. One example would be our African art specialists are mostly located in Paris, for example, and write up all their catalogs in French and market very effectively in the Paris market. But most people who collect African art today, since it's expanded a lot in the last few years, are not in France. So how do you get out beyond the hyperlocal marketing places? Other times, one example was we were just setting up an event in Dallas recently where we don't have a small office and where we don't have a lot of clients. We were able to put together a quick search campaign using keywords on anything that might have been art related in Dallas. And we did that in like an hour, and we were able to get an extra 30 or 40 people to an event to make sure that we had great coverage. So I would say for us, it's a constant battle to try to use where are the people that we need to reach, what context are they in right now, and how do I best execute? And it's a bigger, digital's gone from about 10% of our budget 3 years ago to about 70% now. So there's been a big shift in using the tools that are available to make sure we reach the right person at the right time.
Great, those are great answers. So the level of precision that we've seen, precision increase of location-based targeting has gone up dramatically in even just the last 5 years. Obviously, in-app advertising with latitude and longitude is would know either whether we're on stage or in the audience. That's how accurate that is. And then you've got IP level targeting that can be used either for household level targeting or in B2B for business level targeting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you feel like there's sort of too much precision can get in the way? Do you love the precision? How do you find that balance?
For us, it's a constant battle of driving yourself crazy, of being too specific, and wanting to do 100 different, very specifically targeted, fenced areas, locations, what have you, and then kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, you can just run successfully with something that maybe is a wider net. So it's really dependent on what you're looking for, what your goals are, and what market you're in, especially. Direct mail was obviously the best way to fence and come up with an area that you wanted to go out to, a certain amount of people, a certain demographic, a certain household income. So it is exciting now to use the digital side of that to really curate an area and really dial into a specific group that you want to go after. You were talking about Dallas and your art pop up there, which was fantastic that you were able to do the search campaign for that. However, in markets especially that we are new in SDK, as we're expanding these digital aspects of it to really help us target what our goals are for the clientele, who we're trying to build, who we're trying to get new exposure to, new business acquisition for us has been beautiful, to really target in on our core demographic.
Well, I can give you one example that failed miserably and one that has kind of taken off. So originally we thought hyperlocal marketing, that will be beacons. And so we actually have tried that within our building to get, the idea is if someone's standing right in front of a particular work, that they're interested in that, and then we could deliver messages to their phone or whatever, or email if we knew who they were. The real problem is, our art specialists tend to rearrange their exhibitions at the last second. So all of a sudden the painting that you thought was right there in that corner is actually, 20 yards away, which from a beacon perspective just messes everything up. What actually turned out to have legs, though, was simply putting the UPC code on our lot cards, which are a piece of paper that we put up next to something. Very easy to move it around, and really easy to get quick details and background on that, because it's very common. By the way, one of our real marketing challenges is that people don't know that they can afford things at Sotheby's, and the fact is, yes, all of you can. Maybe you won't buy the Modigliani for 157 million, but most things, in terms of number of things that we sell, are less than $10,000, and there's a lot less than $5,000. But when you're walking around an exhibit, it can get very crowded during the exhibitions. They're free and open to the public, but if you just grab our mobile app, snap a lot card, you can get all the verbatim history on something, all the provenance behind. One example, I was looking for some pottery for my wife, and I'm walking around the exhibit, and it was kind of hard to tell. They laid it out to look really beautiful, but is this lot these 3 pieces or these 4, or how is that organized? Because there were a couple next to each other. Well, with the lot card, you just snap it, and so digitally, it made it incredibly convenient for me to get exactly what I needed to know right there.
Cool, thanks so much. It's interesting you mentioned direct mail, Joe, because a lot of folks still rely pretty heavily on direct mail. We actually got so excited about digital direct mail that we bought 2 digital direct mail companies and started overlaying the hyper geo-targeting with when things were going to be hitting the mailbox, and that was really cool. And interestingly, to John, to your point, we created personalized URLs and personalized promo codes so that we would know when the person got there who they were. So sort of flipping opposite, instead of getting more information about the thing you're thinking of buying. In this case, by visiting the website and entering a particular code, we knew everything about that individual, and so conversion rate went up significant double digits. So the next question is really about location as a proxy for intent. So in search marketing, it was sort of what made it great, and the reason I got so excited about it 23 years ago was people are raising their hand and telling you exactly what they want, and that they're interested in learning about it at that instant in time. So you have their attention, right? But location is also a great proxy for intent. Knowing where a person is sometimes tells you a lot about what they might want. It might not be as good as search, but it's still pretty cool. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and if or limitations, if you think there are limitations to that.
This is a great one, actually, for the both of us, because we have so many different locations. And I'll draw from the example that I used earlier about the two different, SDKs in Manhattan. One is in Midtown Manhattan, in Bryant Park, in the shadows of the Bank of America building. The other one is in the meatpacking, trendy neighborhood. It has been around for a while, downtown vibe and scene. And, the clientele's intent is ragingly different between the two restaurants. Midtown happens to be a more professional scene, usually something work-related, business clientele, whereas downtown is definitely a social scene. However, it's the same person. It's the same person going to both restaurants. It's, they're just looking for a different experience in both. So that's really interesting for us to watch. We have these profiles created for all of our guests, especially, those who frequent our restaurants, and the behaviors change drastically from when they are dining in our restaurants in Midtown to when they're dining in our restaurant downtown. Now you can take that on a global scale and understand, when you're moving across the country, or even, into Canada or our European restaurants, how differently these consumers that we already have are acting in our restaurants around the world. So it's very interesting to watch, someone's profile as they move from location to location, and how they are spending, how long they're staying, the type of items that they're purchasing, if they're throwing an event with us. So it's very interesting, yes.
I would say we have one use case that's particularly interesting around this area that kind of surprised me how well it's worked, and it's now become a standard thing that we operate on. We care about a certain number of people, and we care about reaching those people all the time, no matter really where they are. And traditional media and things like that don't work very well for us because we're trying to reach such a small fraction of the population, and there aren't that many media outlets that make sense for us. The context of where somebody is, so for example, if you're at an art fair, so we started doing this with Art Basel in London, so we know you're in Regent Park. If you're in Regent Park on those days, then we need to get out in front of you. Now, you're not searching for us, but you're searching for, so we just went down their website, and every pop-up restaurant that's at that art fair, every art gallery that is sort of a quasi-competitor or partner of ours, those are the things that you're looking for. If you're in Regent Park and you're searching for White Cube on the day of Art Basel in London, then you need to know about the exhibit we have going on in Mayfair at that time, right? And so that has been a surprisingly effective way for us to reach both our existing clients and also new clients that we don't have yet in a context that's really valuable. So the search terms we're using are not anything to do with promoting our normal sales. It's about what are the people that we need to reach searching for at that exact time, in that exact location.
Cool. What you guys were talking about reminded me of one case where we had a client where they wanted to sort of retarget people that they might not ever go to their website. So what we did is we pixeled the splash page on the Wi-Fi login for the people using the Wi-Fi in the restaurant, and that created the audience, right? So then you knew that you were reaching your existing customers, and it didn't. You couldn't spend more than like $40 a month on it because it was so small, but you sort of just knew it was working because it was your customers. So there's if you really start to brainstorm, there's just so many different ways you can adapt this. Where the people are means a lot. Obviously, if they're already customers in the restaurant business, it's not a one-time sale. Like, washing machines is once every 10 years, right? So restaurants, it's all about the regular customer, your 80-20 rule. Let's see. So there's been a lot of talk about sort of the third-party data and privacy issues, obviously from Cambridge Analytica, first with Facebook, to now more recently Facebook's challenges with potentially having leaked a whole bunch of data to Chinese phone carrier companies. Do you feel like that even though we're not covered by GDPR, we sort of have to be cognizant of this level of concern from our consumers? Can you be too creepy when you know so much about the individual that you could tell them in the ad that you know almost who they are, but or do you just sort of make it more serendipitous, right? When you're messaging to them like, oh, I'm seeing the SDK ad again. Like, what a coincidence! I was just there last week,
Yes. Definitely a hot topic, and something that we're very cognizant of. I rely heavily on the agencies that we work with to make sure that we are doing it correctly. So, being publicly traded as well adds an extra level of anxiety, if you will, about using third-party data and if it's the right data. And again, we don't want to creep anyone out. So, like I mentioned, we work with business agencies, we work with digital agencies to really advise on, exactly how far we can go. It's interesting when we use existing information from our internal data to help build things to target new business acquisition rather than the customers we already have for more generic, general messaging rather than something so specific of, I saw you were shopping at your local grocery store and you picked up steak sauce. How about a steak at STK? I think that might be too creepy for us. However, it's a topic that we're constantly talking about of whose data are we using, how are we getting it, and how are we ensuring that we are not crossing the line. And that's really, really important for us from a global standpoint, even if we're not covered under GDPR. Our restaurants in Europe are certainly more cognizant of that than we are here. But yes, we want to be careful as to whose data we're using, how in-depth it is, and how it's going to translate to our customer.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, it's a huge issue because we operate in Europe a lot. So we just assume that we're under GDPR globally. Because it would be super complicated, by the way, to manage things in a couple of different ways. And for example, when we have a lot of email addresses, email is an incredibly important channel for us, and we often don't really know where those people are with any degree of specificity. So if we can't be sure where they are, we're just going to assume that they're in Europe, and that's what we have to do. It's actually, I'm actually looking forward to GDPR in some ways because it raises the standard and sort of ensures that we're doing everything we can to protect our clients' privacy, because that's something our clients care about an awful lot.
Great, thanks. One question that we actually discussed in the green room may apply to a lot of the marketers here, which is the idea that not all the information that people are gathering about your company is on your website anymore, right? Essentially, you're syndicating a whole bunch of information out to the world. It's sort of like a flavor of digital PR to some extent, but sometimes it's just raw information. So if you want to talk a little bit about sort of what's your sort of information or content syndication strategy to make sure that the right information isn't just on your website, but it's sort of wherever the person wants to look.
I'll start on this one. I just looked the other day, we started an IFT channel a little over a year ago, and honestly, I just kind of set it and forget it. Looked the other day, and over $1 million in revenue would come in this year from people who use it. It's only a few hundred users, but some of those are B2B people who just need to see everything by a certain category, and they've set up IFT to work for them. So we had built the APIs, to enable our mobile apps anyway. So it was very, very little effort to start syndicating that out to let people use the data however they want to. Auction data is by nature public anyway. In some geographies, it's the law that you make it public, so we always do anyway. And so really we want people to be able to get it however it's most convenient for them to do that. And they do, which is kind of encouraging.
Great. It's a mountainous effort to keep all of our information up to date, especially with all of our, third-party sites that we list on. So local listing management is really big for us, and we outsource that absolutely, because I would have to employ hundreds of people to keep all of our restaurant information up to date. So we use multiple different, agencies and companies. We use single platform to update all of our menus. It's very, very important for us. We're up to, I think, 17, 18 SDKs around the world. So when one of our very creative chefs make a small change, for us to then go into our own internal website, Google, Bing, OpenTable, TripAdvisor, the list goes on and on and on, that becomes a mountainous, like I said, process to start updating those. Local listing management, the same. Hours of operation, special events, holidays, you name it. There's constant changes that we are either proactively doing, as we come into a new season, or as, things change in a city, or reactionary. We know that a program is not working, so we have to tighten our hours of operation, or we know, a restaurant is really blossoming and, we need to extend hours of operation. So it's important for us in the digital age to really come up with or find these great partners to work with to help manage all of that work that you don't often think about. Small changes in in a local market actually affect you much larger than you think, because your information is out there in 20 to 50 different third-party sites.
Great, thanks so much. I want to make sure if there are any questions from the audience that we cover what you guys want to hear. So there are mic runners if anyone wants to ask a question, or you can just project and we'll hopefully hear you. Oh, actually, the mic's right there. So.
Excuse me. Hi, thanks very much for the great presentations. I was just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more in terms of how you guys use social media, what platforms you're using, and how.
Sure.
So social and local combined.
How social and local combined are. For us, it's huge. On the digital, from a digital perspective, we really use social now as a reach tool. It's maintained mostly by our press team, who we're very lucky in the sense that as a brand, we get some of the most amazing stuff in the world comes through our doors, and it gets picked up quite easily in the traditional press and then expands there into social. What that does is give us an incredibly cost-effective way to get out in front of millions of people, even though we know the size of our actual purchasing audience isn't going to be that big. But we always know we don't know everybody, and we're in so many different categories, you're always having to bring in new people. But once those people express any kind of interest and then come in, now we've got a way to retarget them either through Facebook or Google or whatever, so that's a way for us to always make sure that we're bringing in new people and not having to spend, we're just not, our advertising budgets wouldn't support a broad reach paid advertising campaign, so social really fills that gap for us.
Social has become a huge tool over the past 5 years, and we've really had to readjust how we use it. Before we actually had local social media channels for every single restaurant, which is just not feasible for us anymore. To maintain a Twitter feed and an Instagram for 20 restaurants around the world is just maddening. So we actually condensed everything into a larger brand handles, and then we had to identify a voice by platform. It was really important for us to identify how we speak to our guests, or how we reach new clientele on each platform, and really what the voice is on each one of the channels. So then from there, we use it for multiple different things, as a reach tool, as information, and also experience. It's really important for us in the hospitality industry to have, not just an in-person experience anymore. It's really something, the experience starts online for us. And a really big part of that interactive experience is on social media. So we use our platforms to engage with our guests before, during, and after an in-person experience, to give more value to their experience.
Great, I think we're pretty much out of time, so you can catch us milling about afterwards. Please join me in thanking our panelists, and we'll see you around.